Hello guys, today I'm just making a video on some basic insights on how to solve questions related to the topic pseudocode. I know many of you guys have this topic coming up for exams, so hopefully this video can help you all in order to understand these type of concepts. So by the way, this is a new video. I've previously made a video on pseudocode itself, so this is just going to be a fresh update on how to solve pseudocode questions. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. And yeah, let's begin with the video. Alright, so the first question is to write an algorithm in pseudocode using a single loop to print 50 names that have been stored in an array. So now, in order to solve this question, first of all, we need to understand what are the main points. So the main points in pseudocode solving, I'm just going to write it down here so that you guys know. The main points in pseudocode solving is that you have to know what an if statement is. So it's going to be written as if, then, else, and if. Now this is like a conditional statement that we can use. There are some other good things that you guys have to remember. Case of statement, that is case of, otherwise, let's say otherwise, and end case. By the way, I would recommend you guys to like by heart this or just recall this kind of notation while doing pseudocode. Then you guys have to remember for to next. That is another important key aspect that you guys have to remember while doing pseudocode. You have to also remember what repeat is. So it's repeat until. We have to also mention that as well. Then we have to also know what while and while is. So we have to write while, do, let's say while, do, and while. Just gonna mention that. So you guys have to remember these points as well. You guys have to remember, if you want to say something about input, just mention input or output itself. And another key statement while doing pseudocode is that you guys have to remember the statement as well, where count should be equivalent to count plus 1. Now the arrow symbol just represents an equal sign. So these are the main points when dealing with pseudocode. We're going to now use all of these points. We're going to implement that in our answers when we're solving pseudocode related questions. So let's start with the first question, is that we have to write an algorithm in pseudocode using a single loop to print 50 names that have been stored in an array. Now, in order to solve question 1, we're just gonna solve it here. So you guys can see question 1 is to write an algorithm in pseudocode using a single loop to print 50 names. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set count as 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set count as 0. While we do that, we're going to write down a while statement, since we have to use a single loop only to print 50 names that have been stored in the array. So you're going to say a while condition. So it's going to be while actually, yeah, it's going to be while. I'm just going to put this in a box so that we can see that individually. We're going to say while count is less than 50. I'm going to mention that since we have to print 50 names. While count is less than 50, do. So you guys noticed that I'm using the same statement as the while, do, and while statement, conditional statement here. And we have to print 50 names, so that means we're going to put an output clause there. So it's going to be output name square brackets count. Okay, so we're just going to print out all the names. Let's say all the names in count, variable in count, less than 50. The count is just something that's going to increase, whereas your name is going to be stored there, and you're just going to output your name accordingly per each count. So that's why we have to increment count by 1. So we're going to increment count as count plus 1. And we're going to end the while loop with an end while statement. Now this is for a total about 3 marks. So that's all the statements that you need to write down. In pseudocode, you just understand all of these keywords and you should be set to go and understand how this is connected with programming. So this is for question 1, is about roughly 3 marks, so that you guys can understand how to solve this type of question. Now let's move on to question 2. Question 2 is to write an algorithm using pseudocode to input 3 different numbers. You have to multiply 2 large numbers and output the result. Now you have to use the variables number 1, number 2, number 3, and answer for result. Now this is an interesting question that we can use here, is that we have to write the algorithm to input 3 numbers. So the first thing, usually when we're doing let's say Python programming, we just say input, right? We immediately say input something and we get it. So in this case, we're going to use the same thing. We're just going to use input number 1, number 2, and number 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So let's just write down the basic of what the question's asking us. Since this is question 2, we have to input 3 numbers. That's what they're asking us. We have to multiply 2 large numbers. That's another statement. We have to output the result and use variables. Use variables num1, num2, and num3, and answer for result. Now in order to do this, so this is the question. I'm just going to write the answer in black pen so that you guys can see that. So in black font, I'm just going to use that just to show you guys what the answer is. So the answer in this case is going to be, in order to solve this, is that first of all we're going to use the repeat function. Let's say the repeat clause here. So you're going to say repeat, so that means it's going to end with repeat until. So we're going to use that word over there. So it's going to be input 3 numbers. By the way, I'm just going to show you the clause here. So you're going to say repeat. This is split, by the way. Repeat, and then once you write repeat down, you're just going to say output, and then you're going to say enter 3 different numbers. All right, so that's going to be your output. At first you're going to say enter 3 different numbers. I'm just going to make this more better. Yeah, okay. Then what you're going to do is, since the question is asking us to input 3 numbers, you're just going to say input, and we have to use the variable names num1, num2, and num3. So you're going to say input number 1, comma number 2, and number 3. Then what you're going to mention is that once we input all this, you're going to say that we have to multiply the 2 largest numbers together. So we're going to mention the until. So since we have mentioned repeat, we're going to say until number 1 is not equal to number 2. By the way, this just means not equal to. That's just a symbol, just saying not equal to. And then you can mention and number 2 is not equal to number 3. You can mention that as well here. It's not equal to number 3. And you can also mention and number 3 is not equal to number 1. You guys can put an if statement there. We can put an if statement if number 3 is less than number 2, right? And since we have to multiply the largest 2 numbers together, right? So if number 3 is less than number 2, and let's say number 3 is less than number 1, we can say then we can mention that thing. By the way, just put these all in capital letters for this if and then your answer should be stored in the result, where answer should be like they said, to store the variable answer for result. So we have to mention the output result. So in this case, the answer is just going to be the largest numbers multiplied together, number 1 multiplied by number 2. And then we're just going to write an end if clause there. So this is the basic step just for writing down if number 3 is less than. Now once we have written down end if, we have to make the other statement. If it's not this is not the end, we have to write some more stuff. If number 2 is less than number 3, and you guys can also mention that, say and or number 2 is less than, let's say, number 1. We're going to write down the same step again. Then the answer is going to be number 3 times asterisk sign number 1. Once you do that, you're going to say end if, since we're just going to output that same thing. Then you're going to mention another if statement. Now this is when number 1 is less than number 2 and number 1 is less than number 3. So we're writing down different conditions for different pseudocode rules, right? For number 1, number 2, and number 3. Then you can mention that then the answer is number 2 multiplied by let's say number 3 in this case, multiplied by number 3. Yeah, this should be about it. Number 3. Okay, just confirming if this is correct way of writing down pseudocode. Yeah, so you just multiply the numbers which are greater than the specific number that's mentioned here. So if two numbers are greater than 1, then you just multiply both of them together. And then we're just going to write down an end if clause. And that's it. This is going to be, by the way, this is not it. Once you write end if, the question asks us, if you look at the question asks us to output the result. So since this is to output the result, what we have to do is we have to write output answer is equal to comma. Let's just put a nice comma there. That's going to be answer. This is going to be a variable. The answer stores the result, whether it be the greatest value that have been multiplied together. I'm just going to show you guys the answer so that you guys can see the values in this case. So this is going to be your pseudocode which you have to write down. This is for roughly about 5 marks, so this should be correct. Yeah. Let's move on to the last one, the last question. Question 3 talks about to write an algorithm to input 1,000 numbers. You have to count which numbers are positive and which numbers are 0, and you have to output the results, and you have to use pseudocode. Now, in order to solve this question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the working somewhere close by. Actually, yeah, we're going to write down the question. So this is going to be question 3. The question 3 asks us to write an algorithm to input 3 numbers. So you're going to say not 3 numbers. You're going to input 1,000 numbers and count which by the way, just write a short note on what you have to do when you read a question. Count numbers which are positive and which numbers are 0 and which numbers are 0. You have to output the results. Now, in order to do this, this is a basic hint on what question 3 is all about, just a summary form. When you guys get a question down, do write what do you think the question is about, the summary form of it, and what the question's asking you guys to solve. So for this question, what I'm going to do is you guys can use a for to next loop. You guys can use an if, then, else, or end if conditional statement as well. But in this case, I'm going to start by using the if, then, and else, or end if clause. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start writing down the answer. So the answer for this one is to place 0 as 0. So we're going to put 0 as 0. And the post count. Post count just means the number you're counting. So that's going to be placed as 0. Post count just represents, this is just it's just shorthand note. By the way, post count just means positive numbers, alright? That's just a short form of saying positive numbers. Then you guys can write down for count. This should be 1 to 1,000, okay? So just write this down in caps. By the way, it's better to write pseudocode in caps for the main parts of pseudocode. So for count, it's 1 to 1,000 since we have to input 1,000 numbers. And then we're going to say input number. Once you're going to say that, you're going to say input number. Then you're going to mention that if number is greater than 0, because the number has to be positive. So you have to count which numbers are positive or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if number is greater than 0. I'm going to mention why, because the number has to be positive, so you can mention that. If number is greater than 0, you can mention that then the post count is going to be equivalent to post count. We're going to increment that by 1, and we're going to put, since this is an if condition, we're going to say end if. That's it. No need for an else statement in this case. Then again, we're going to write down if number. Now this time, since the question is asking us to, if you go back, the question is asking us to count numbers which are positive and which numbers are 0. So if we look at the answer that we have written down, we have to say if the number is 0, then we're going to say that 0, that is this variable that we have stored here. This is going to be incremented to 1 as well, by 1 as well. So it's going to be 0 plus 1, and we're going to mention an end if clause there. Once you do that, you're going to write down a next clause, because that's the most important step when dealing with this. You're going to say next, and you're going to output, since they have asked us to output the results. That's what question 3 is asking us to do. Is you're going to say output, you're just going to write that word down, output post count. That's a variable we store all the positive numbers in, comma. But in inverted commas, you're going to say positive numbers. So post count is going to be all the numbers. So let's say 53, that could be post count, that's positive number count, so it's going to be 53 positive numbers. That's just an example of how I'm saying it. Output, then we have to mention the variable 0, and you're going to mention the zeros counted. Close it. So this seems to be the answer for question 3. This seems to be about it for question 3. I'm just going to show you guys the working so you guys can take it down. So 0, I'm just going to keep scrolling. Yeah. Okay. So this seems to be about it for question 3, but do remember the main points. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot, and new content will be posted soon. And yeah, I think that's it. Alright, do comment below on what your thoughts are about this video as well. And timecodes will be in the description box. That's if the timecodes are needed. And yeah, I think that's it. Alright, bye guys.